Hey,
Hey,
Laurie. Good to see you. World
good to see
traveler
you.
Laurie all over the place. Well,
Oh my.
it's so
Yeah,
great
well,
to be with you.
thank you. We had a little break last week because I took the week off, but
Oh,
there's
it was
never a week off, you know.
wow. I mean, it was awesome. Mark was awesome. Jay is always wonderful. There's so much positive news to share, so much good stuff happening in the world of media right now. And for the people who are listening or watching, this show, we're really glad to have you here and look forward to your input moving forward. I'm Doug Smith. I'm broadcasting from Ottawa, Canada, capital of Canada, right here on the Ottawa River. I actually can look across the lake and see the Parliament buildings from where I am. So, and
Oh, wow.
my books, Doug Smith's books, his two books are in the Parliamentary Library. They actually got
Oh,
inducted there.
nice,
So,
nice.
yeah, so that's who I am, man. You are?
I'm Dr. Laurie Davis, and normally I'm coming to you from Drayton Valley, Alberta, but I am housing myself right now at the beautiful River Cree Hotel and Casino. If you don't know about it, look it up. Huge project here that is owned by the Enoch Cree Nation, and they do so much good with the money that they earn here at the casino. It's just amazing what they have on the go. So that's where I'm coming from, and lots of entertainment. And, of course, there's all those slots and the machines downstairs. I haven't ventured down yet, but I think I'll stay away from that
Or make a contribution, right?
or make a contribution. Yes, yes.
Well, that's amazing. And what are you doing? Today we're here really to talk about self worth and how it applies to everything we're doing in our life. Because this fall we've got a crazy list of guests, and we're leading up to the Invictus Games, and we want to give people a solid foundation on what's happening in the world, in your world, but what the techniques that you're using, the teaching that you're doing, so that people can get out of their trauma, they can see their trauma, because trauma, sometimes it just happens to us and it envelops us, right?
Hmm. Well, actually, Doug, you'd be pleased to know that I used our show yesterday. I used this platform to support the healing of a family who lost their dad, their uncle, their brother um, in May. And his name was Dexter Adams. And he went into the hospital, nothing serious, just, getting ready to go to long term care. And he didn't have any life threatening situations or anything like that. But he went in there, and a nurse proceeded to cut his braids off. He had braids down.
So that's like cutting the hair of a Rasta.
Right. And it was a foreign nurse who did that, who knows nothing about the culture. And this hospital frequents our indigenous people, are in there all the time. And his wife arrived for a visit, and his braids were in the garbage can on top of a soiled diaper.
What? That sounds like something that would have happened in 1950.
Right. It really rocked the family. Now, what happened? He died shortly thereafter. And they had pictures of him, like they had a picture of him with his braids, and he was laying in bed, and he had his peace sign up and a big smile. And then a picture after she didn't even recognize him. After he got his hair cut, he's in the bed, he's slumped over, doesn't want to eat. The ramifications cost him his life.
Well, tell me more about the situation. What happened to him? Did he have an accident? Did he just did he get brought in for something else? Like,
Well, he was coming.
was he in life threatening danger?
No, no, completely cognitive. Had a few little issues going on, so testing and stuff like that. But while he was in there, he fell 4 times, broke a shoulder, broke a hip while he was in the hospital.
And
Like,
he
unbelievable.
was taking care of himself when he wasn't in the hospital. He was
That's right.
managing, but he didn't know his way around, probably.
Yeah. So the family filed a complaint, an informal complaint with the ombudsperson's office, and they, they're proceeding with an investigation. But they invited me to come and see if I would do an interview, and I did, and it was probably one of the best shows I've ever done in my life. Just being able to support them on the show, and when you watch the show, you'll see that.
Yeah, now would you be able to put that show up, Laurie, the location sometime maybe during the break,
Yeah,
grab it
yeah,
and let people go right from here right to there.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
But it's just about the lack of knowledge, lack of cultural sensitivity on behalf of people who are looking after people.
Lack of consciousness, right?
Lack of consciousness,
They they
exactly.
they just they don't have the ability to see a better path forward because they're not conscious of it. They're totally unaware, and that's what this show is all about, right? That's the reason we really started this, was to cultivate awareness. And now this show has sort of spread or germinated out into, wow, there's 6 shows, right, Laurie? Maybe you
Yes.
could tell everybody what's happening and at what time during the week, because
Well,
this is
of course,
about self-worth, right? I mean, this is really
yeah.
about
Well,
self-worth.
we do a show every day at 9 o'clock in the morning, unless it's something else that has prevents us from doing that. But Mondays is about empowerment, self-care. Tuesday is finance. Wednesday is wellness. Thursday is our specialized communities, our veterans. And Friday's just a fun day. But then you and I do the press box, which is show number 6.
Yes.
And I'm going to reignite my show, Voices of Indigenous People, after yesterday, because that has spearheaded me into there's more cases. And right?
Yes.
So
Yes.
I want to be able to access, and I have a vehicle to do that.
Yes, to be able to highlight, right?
Yes.
As a highlighter pen almost. Look, we're gonna draw your attention to this because there's so much stuff happening, and people tend to brush it under the carpet if they can, and where Indigenous people live can sometimes be quite remote, and it's still quite easy to brush it under the carpet per se. So
Right.
anything that we can do to prevent that brushing under the carpet, if you know what I mean,
Mhm.
is beneficial. So if there's any listeners out there who have ideas, please,
Oh,
chime in.
well, the thing is, one of the comments that the niece made was people don't understand. If you come here from another country, let's say you come here from the Philippines or you come in, you can always go back home. But our Indigenous people, this is their home.
Hmm.
They don't have another country to go to
Hmm.
because this is their native land.
We need to get you to Ottawa, Laurie. You know what? You would be I can't think of anybody more perfect than you. I know a lot of people across the country and met hundreds of thousands of people, but I don't see anybody as qualified as you to come and share a message like that, on the Hill, like, to make it clear and put it out there, because your communication skills will allow you to make it a perfect scenario. So let me talk to some people and see what's happening in that space, and you can envision that too in your meditations.
Well, they appreciated so much that I was knowledgeable. I have done my studies. I've been on reserves for over 25 years, on and off reserves, north, south, east, and west of North America.
Mm-hmm.
Not too much I don't know. And as a matter of fact, I brought along a picture of my mentor. You know, if you can see her or
Pull it
not.
back towards you a bit. Yeah.
And
Oh, there it
there
is.
it
There it
is.
is. See
There
it.
it is. This is Lillian Francis. This is my niece, Meredith. And this
Oh,
picture was
beautiful.
taken 25 years ago.
Unreal.
Isn't that beautiful? I'd like
Beautiful.
this to be a big poster
That'd be,
because you
you could get
see,
that done today. Today,
yeah, yeah,
yeah.
because a part of what, we're not responsible for what our ancestors did when they got here from Europe and so on, but we are responsible to be part of the solution, to what happened. That has always been my belief.
Mm-hmm.
I can't fix and change what happened. Not responsible for what my ancestors did, but I can be responsible for being part of the solution. So,
And the communication piece is the piece that's missing from
yes,
most people's tool belt.
that's
And the way I look at the brain is the communication piece is in direct relation to the worth you feel about yourself, to your self-worth.
sure.
Because anybody can figure out the communication piece, but you got to work on self-worth to be able to want to communicate, to be able to want to share with people in a meaningful way what it means, what's going on with Aboriginal people, with First Nations.
Well, do you realize how many cases? I mean, and not this is not, and I said this to our guests yesterday. This is not to minimize or disrespect what happened to Dexter, but if that happened to him, how many other things are going on that we don't know anything about because, like you just said, the family members don't feel that they have the right to advocate or they don't have the confidence to step out and say, hey, excuse me, this family did. And that's the difference. This
Let's
family
build
said,
let's build a subscription model. I shouldn't be sharing this with everybody, but hey, listen, let's you and I build a subscription model, a page. It just has to be a page, right? One landing page. I'll volunteer to build a landing page, and
okay,
we'll make a landing page for First Nations on my digital platform, and then we'll make sure that you get a copy of every hit that it gets. So we'll put something up there so that
well,
we can.
anything that we can do to help educate the public.
Yes. Well, and it's
It's,
finding the people who are qualified to educate. You and
yeah,
I both know that there's a lot of people walking around that have other motivations and,
yes,
you know, pretending to be educators
yeah.
and it doesn't really go together very well. Their stuff doesn't make any sense. What does Georg Northoff say? Nonsensical.
Nonsensical. Right.
Nonsensical.
Yeah. And I had another little situation happen while I was here. I've had so much happen since I was here. I'm walking,
Amazing.
I'm walking down to my first meeting yesterday. Well, to meet up with this family and these two young men, native men, were in the hallway, and there's a big mirror at the end of the hallway where all the like what the meeting rooms are. So they were there taking really cool pictures in the mirror. And they said, hey, listen, isn't this cool? And they looked at me and they said, hey, you want to get in a really cool picture with us? And I said, sure. So I went over and I stood between them and I, did my little thing. And they were taking pictures. And they said, thank you so much. And I said, well, you just never know who you're getting your picture taken with. And they said, oh. So I gave them my card with our show on them and everything.
Wow.
And one guy said, oh, could I ask you a question? And I said, sure. He said, how do you get over a really bad breakup?
Hmm.
And right there, he wanted my professional opinion on that. And I said, well, you know what? I'm going to tell you. You're a good looking young man, and there's better fish in the sea than the ones that have been caught and pulled out.
And you know what? He probably remember that for the rest of his life.
Well, he said, oh my gosh, I never thought of it that way.
Yeah,
I said, well, that's
that was.
directly from the East Coast, my dear.
But it's about nature and it's about what he understands.
That's right.
You put it in those terms, and that's communication, right?
Yeah,
And
innately.
yeah, so quit trying to speak, high German to
Yeah,
people who don't speak the language.
I
And I
never.
don't no 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 no, I'm not nothing negative about
Oh,
Germans.
no,
I
no,
just it's
no
it's a,
disrespect
but
intended.
it's about communication. It's about transferring that information into, because every single one of us, and we talk about First Nations, we talk about veterans, but every single one of us walks around and at points in our life feels like there's something wrong with us. And it's
Absolutely.
not a requirement. It's not a badge. I suffer from it as well.
Yeah,
I've got a
me
lot
too.
on the go, and I forget, when people hire me to fly down to Maryland and speak next month, that they've already vetted me, that they've looked at my stuff, that they like who I am. And why would I put myself at a disadvantage by saying, well, maybe I feel all this pressure. That pressure doesn't come from anywhere, but right
Except
inside
you.
here.
Yeah. Yeah.
And
Well,
my wife,
yeah.
And my wife Patty, we've been married for 37 years. She said, you haven't changed since you played. And what it caused me to do in the National Hockey League when I played professional sports is it caused me to throw a grenade into very, very good, quiet, nice, comfortable situations. It's
That's
like
hilarious.
something grabs hold of you.
Yes.
And that's the way I was, right? I was so impulsive that my emotions would grab hold of me, and I'd grab the grenade and I'd pull the pin and I'd throw it. And it's only because everything was quiet and normal and nice. And so if you feel like that, there's a way out. So we're going to talk a little bit about that later in the show, and some people that are going to come on our show that you'll get a chance to meet. So.
Well, this brings back, we'll have to bring up our good friend Tony McKegney's name here right now, because I was having some phone conversations with him, and he said, will you stop selling yourself to me? You don't have to sell yourself to me. I'm already sold.
Third black player to play in the NHL.
Yeah.
Didn't know there was any other black players in the NHL until he saw Grant Fuhr, right? I mean,
right.
That's pretty recent. Grant Fuhr is still a pro golfer playing golf in Florida. He owns his own golf course down there.
Yeah.
This is stuff that's happened to us in our recent history.
Yeah. Tony says, I've already done my research. I know your background. I know people you know. You don't have to keep telling me what you know you can do.
Oh,
he said,
he's a Saskatchewan
you already know.
boy.
Yeah, you already know what you can do. I said, okay, then I won't be doing that anymore. I was trying to raise his level of consciousness.
He sees you like, look at, I could say this because Tony and I are like brothers, but he sees you as Scotty Bowman.
Awesome.
He sees you as the winningest coach of all time right now. So there you go. Don't mess it up.
Thank you, Doug. Okay, I won't throw the grenade, I promise.
But how many people listening to a show like this? If there was 1,000 people listening, 995 would say, yeah, I felt like that way in my life.
Yes.
And after we take a break, when we come back, I'm going to share with you this new book called Neurowaves, and I'm just going to read a couple of pieces in it, and I'll share with you the other stuff that this author is doing, and if you're looking for anybody to speak about how the human functions, I would suggest you start with this individual. His name is Georg Northoff. So,
all right, we'll be right back. Welcome back, everybody. You're listening to the Press Box here on the Disability Channel with our esteemed host, Mr. Doug Smith, and myself, co-host, being featured today. Oh my goodness, new book, Doug?
Yeah, well, I don't read a lot these days, but I try to pick the most important stuff that I can read.
Okay.
And you can get this from Queen's University Press right now. This is called Neurowaves by Georg Northoff. And it's about the brain, time, and consciousness.
Cool.
And we're going to talk about that a little bit. But these books follow his encyclopedias on the brain about coding and consciousness, because the brain codes itself. Mm-hmm. It codes itself first. So I'm coding your brain right now. Your brain is being coded. Then there's a gap, and then consciousness occurs. See those waves?
Yes.
And so he wrote these two books. He's got 3 PhDs, one in psychiatry, one in neuroscience, and one in philosophy.
Oh, good for him.
Yes. And Georg, he's the coolest guy. He runs the mental health center in Ottawa, the Royal Ottawa, and he heads up the neuroscience department at Ottawa University. He was one of the golden boys, like sort of like, I guess, like me when I was playing hockey, but of this area of neuroscience. So I really, let me read just the back, and people will, I think people will get it because he really simplifies it. The connection of the brain to the mind remains one of the most persistent mysteries in philosophy and neuroscience. Georg Northoff proposes a new approach to the so-called mind-body problem, drawing on an insight from physics, time structures. All objects and events around the world, and all objects and events are in dynamic relationship. This also shapes the brain, as it is part of the dynamic of the world as a whole. In Neurowaves, Northoff positions that the entire world is structured by waves of time, and argues that the passing of these waves through our brains, neurowaves, produce mental experience. The brain's neural waves transform into mental waves. Time and its dynamics are shared by the brain and mind as their common currency. As in physics and biology, that radically changes our view. Copernicus shows us how the Earth moves, and that its movements are just a tiny part of the universe's passage of time. Darwin shows that the human species is one among many species passing through evolution's timescales. Northoff calls for another Copernican revolution, replacing the mind-body problem with the questions about the temporal dynamic relationship between brain and the world.
Oh, wow.
Not the mind, the body, the brain and the world.
So
Okay.
listen, I've just had a text from a viewer, and she said, I thought this show was supposed to be about you today.
Well, we're just talking off the cuff, but I wanted to get your opinion of what Georg has to say with respect to self-worth, right? Because that's what the show is about today. Yes, absolutely.
That's right. Just so there's no misunderstanding, you know.
Yes. No, just promoting, future.
Yes, and we're going to have Dr. North on the show.
Yes, he's coming on, and so, but how does that relate to, the mind, body, world, brain? That's the shift in physics and neuroscience. So it lines up perfectly with self-worth.
Well, yes, because if you don't have any self-worth, you don't really you don't really have all the tools you need to reach that level of consciousness.
Thank you.
Okay, because that's what happened yesterday in our interview with our little family. It was helping them we helped them to raise their level of consciousness, that they were not alone in the world, that there are people who will help, that all is not lost, you see. But is that not a rise in the level of consciousness, Doug?
Yes, okay. Absolutely.
According to the definitions that you're giving.
Yes, and that strengthens the physical and the psychological, because consciousness is a different type of anatomy than physical and psychological.
Right.
That's what's being said. So now you have a noose to tie the physical to the psychological, so your psychological doesn't just wander off, but you're physically fine. You know what I mean?
Yeah, or vice versa.
Yeah, or vice versa. It works the same way. So you don't want that physical and psychological piece to get disconnected, because all of a sudden you become completely unconscious. You'll fall into complete
And how many times were you unconscious in your life?
So I've woken up 6 times in the hospital so far. I don't plan on waking up in the hospital again. But yes, and all head injuries. I'm so thankful that certain parts of my brain didn't get impacted in the collisions I had. But the worst 3 were when I ran into a car on a motorcycle head on at 80 kilometers an hour. That took about 3 days to come to. When I broke my neck and had had surgery on my neck, that was waking up, I think, 4 or 5 times just with that injury alone.
Yeah.
coming to, you know, that feeling when you come to and you're out again. I mean, most people have felt that before. So yeah, losing consciousness is a peaceful place. And what's happened to me is I've had the opportunity to feel consciousness right from its very beginning, when you open up your eyes and you have to figure everything out all over again.
Right.
And I think anybody who's lost consciousness has had that experience. Have you lost consciousness, Laurie?
Never.
Oh, you've
Except,
never. Oh, wow.
well, I shouldn't say never. I take that back. Uh, when I was a child, I had my tonsils out, and 6 months later, my appendix ruptured.
Okay.
So that was under the ether, right? And then just recently, 2 years ago, when I had cancer and I had my surgery. But those are the only times
Okay.
that I. But I mean, when I woke up, I knew everything. It wasn't like you. I had to relearn everything.
You had to start over again.
Yeah, but it was quick because there was no damage. You know.
Okay, so your brain rewired itself. They gave you the tools
Yeah.
to rewire things.
Yeah. Well, I
Huh.
mean, if you wake up, I knew immediately who I was and where I was and what had just happened, and
Yes.
all of that. But
And
I have a question.
it rebuilds itself quickly. That's been your
Instantly.
experience one time, and that's been my experience every time. That's what I was listening for.
Yeah,
Because it rebuilds itself really, really quickly, as long as it has the right things being fed to it.
that's right.
Right, because what happens is, if you surround the patient with a whole bunch of people who are telling the patient they're wonderful, you'll come out of consciousness, you'll gain consciousness much quicker.
Hmm.
And if you're trying to come out of consciousness and you only think about helping other people rather than helping yourself, you'll gain consciousness faster. Just little secrets like that, right?
That's right. Well, you
And
see,
you
what happened with this interview yesterday, what I kept coming up with and thinking about, which I hadn't really shared with anyone yet, was when they cut those braids off, like you said, might as well have cut his arms off. But do you think that impacted his level of worthiness and consciousness?
yes.
Totally. It cut it off right there, and he died. So, a lack of self worth and a lack of consciousness, death is the end result,
Yes.
however it gets impacted.
And you
So,
have to go through the lack of self-worth before you become unconscious,
mhm,
right? Because when you're unconscious, time, the brain, all that stuff stops.
yeah. So, we have people walking around on two legs who are unconscious, not in the physical sense, but not aware, blind, can't see, can't hear, don't want to hear. And I call that the walking dead.
Yeah, it's almost more dangerous than that. I feel, because it's totally reactionary.
Right.
It just walks along and it reacts to everything that gets close to it in an unpredictable manner.
That's correct.
And as I talk about, is that emotional control piece is probably the toughest piece for me, out of the 8 behaviors. You know, like the purpose piece, the motivation piece, those are all simple compared to, and comprehensible, but the emotional control piece, for me personally, because of the childhood conditioning I experienced, is just a hurdle that I have to jump over regularly.
Right. Well, I have something that I shared many years ago with one of our chiefs in the area. And I just recently put it up on Facebook, and I got put in jail for a day. But Facebook jail, I mean. And, I know for a fact that we don't have a crime problem. We don't have an alcohol problem. We don't have a suicide problem. What we have is a self worth problem. And we have institutions and organizations that are so dysfunctional, and they do not have any information on the repair and restoration of one's self worth after a trauma.
And we all suffer from trauma. That was so well said, Laurie. We got to pull that, what you just said, we got to pull that out. It's wonderful.
Well, I walked into a band office and I shared that with a chief many years ago. And he looked at me, his chin went to the desk. And I said, if you want me to come in to solve the alcohol problem or the suicide problem, I'm no good to you at all. But what I can do is help with the repair and restoration of self worth that creates that mess.
Mm-hmm.
And I've just recently pulled that out of the archives and put it up, and it didn't get received very well.
Explain.
Well, because people don't really know what that means. What is self worth? They don't understand what that means. What do you mean we don't have a crime problem? We have a crime problem. They only see the physical, results and manifestations of no self worth.
We really have to dig down and explore the relationship between consciousness and self-worth. I think, when you speak about this, I feel that that's where the answer lies, right? Is how do you explain self-worth and consciousness, because you're really becoming unconscious as you move through the negative,
Yes.
the bad self-worth, right?
I think they're so close. They're just two different words that we're using, but I think the ramifications or the manifestations of high self-worth, are similar, if we were to explore it, are similar to that of being highly conscious, vibrationally operating at a high rate of vibration.
But the self-worth drops to the bottom and you only have this much self-worth. It looks different. Yeah.
Well, it's like the guy who throws the hand grenade into the calm situation.
Yeah. Yes.
Right?
Yes.
In an effort to get some response.
And I can hide. Like I can hide. Like that's the thing about this whole conversation that we're having is I can hide that, right? And it just comes out.
Oh yeah.
Like,
well, let's talk about how do people hide their low self-worth. How do they hide it? They hide behind things. So they hide behind money. They may hide behind their career, their religion,
their car,
looking good, their fancy car, their renovated kitchen, their beautiful kids.
Yes.
Because you see, when you have a lot of shame because you haven't healed the trauma and you're carrying the shame from the trauma, then we do things to hide the shame. So how do we cover it up?
So it just piles up.
That's right.
It just piles up, and you can get it going the other way, like almost instantaneously, right?
Yeah.
I mean, that's the crazy thing about it. And I have to confess, I've taken Laurie's courses, so I know what I'm talking about. It is phenomenal. So tell us about that automatic switch.
Well, it's actually a switch of energy, because most people are coming from a place of that shame leads me to not thinking very highly of myself and always feeling like there's something wrong with me. That's where that comes from.
Mm-hmm.
So that shame, well, I'm in a generation, Doug, where our moms would say, well, you ought to be ashamed of yourself. And we're 6 and we haven't done anything yet, right? You ought to be ashamed of yourself the way you treated your sister. You ought to be ashamed of yourself. Talk about conditioning.
Yeah.
So when I'm feeling ashamed, and that's why people can't look you straight in the eye. Sometimes it's a cultural thing, but not often. It's mostly about eyes dropping to the floor and not being able to make eye contact. And I taught high school for a year, and the teachers told me, watch out, Monday morning, we'll be able to tell. Just look out at the kids, and you'll be able to tell who lost their virginity on the weekend.
Wow.
I know. And I went, well, that's crazy. What are you talking about? Because I didn't know anything then. And sure enough, the vivacious cheerleader, outgoing class president, all of a sudden can't look at anybody in the eye. And it was true. We could tell because of the shame that came with that they weren't even conscious of.
And so it begins to pile up. The trauma and the disconnection that trauma causes, right? Mm-hmm. That separation inside of us, and then we end up piling up the wrong pile. We're throwing stuff on the wrong pile.
That's right. So, like, if a little, if you're fortunate enough to have a little granddaughter at some point in time, and she comes in through the door and she's got a pretty little dress on, and we would say to, welcome her and say, "Oh my gosh, you're so beautiful." And she'll put her hands on her hips and go, "I know,"
That's
because
true.
she knows, because there's nothing there yet that has disconnected her from her own level of consciousness and self worth. I
Mm-hmm.
think the same thing. I think our conversations will come so close together that way.
Mm-hmm.
One is scientific, one isn't, but at the same time, they are all.
Wow. And here's the thing about Laurie Davis. Now, everybody that's listening, Laurie's been working at this for a long time. She has over 1,000 workshops, and she could tell with me, and I'm good at hiding stuff. Um, which workshop I needed to start with, to be able to see that things can begin to change. The sun can start to come out, and like people that you never thought you'd meet all of a sudden come into your life. You start to you get into different groups of people and you start to chat about things, and it doesn't matter, there's no pressure, and then all of a sudden the other pressure in life goes away. It's quite phenomenal, Laurie. And it's real, right? It's all real, and it works. And yeah, if you have a bad time, and that's okay with the people that you work with. I've never come across somebody in your programs that doesn't love being there.
No, I could probably name three in 32 years,
Really?
but that's
Thousands of
because,
people, and thousands of people go through your room,
oh,
and
yeah.
if you're sitting out there and looking for something, at least look at this as an option, like come and join us.
Well, it's not, and those three people came with the conditioning
Hmm.
that it wasn't going to work anyway.
Hmm.
So they had that preconceived notion, which is why they left halfway through, or very, very few people quit ever. I had three that I can remember. But, and the other thing is they just keep coming back for more.
Those three people, they were looking for something finite.
Yeah.
Yeah, this isn't finite. Well, what we're
No,
talking about, by the way, all the listeners out there, this is called infinite. Okay, this is
that's
something that
right.
you'll be able to talk about with your kids till they're
Right.
on your deathbed. You'll be saying this is how the process works. You know what I
Right.
mean? That's how fun it is.
Well, because that once you start, I don't know about you, Doug, but I've been my most interesting study, the study of Lori. Never mind the study of somebody else, and then the study of me. And that was the most difficult thing I ever did, because I had to come clean with certain things, because the real Lori was hiding behind those things.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, and so, but I always tell my clients, when you start that personal development journey, there is no arrival time.
Yes, it like Georg talks about. It's almost like waves.
Oh,
Stuff I'll be in the kitchen and I'll get these waves, and I'll go, where did I get those waves from? And I go, oh, okay, yeah, that was Lori. We were talking. Yes, it just hits you, right? And the more you get involved, the more you insert yourself, the less you indulge yourself, the faster the journey becomes.
that's right.
And when I say fast, I don't mean fast downhill. I mean fast
Fast uphill.
uphill.
Well, I had a client tell me one time, "Is it okay if I give you a name?" And I said, "Sure. What is it?" She said, "You're like a velvet hammer." I said, "A velvet hammer?" "Well, yeah." She said, "You're all warm and gushy on the outside." This matronly figured, gushy grandma type person. But then when you know, hit me
Yeah,
on
the
the forehead
question,
with
the
a two
the
by
the,
four
the
with a
tough
question,
question. Yeah, the
right?
question that only has one answer,
That's
and
right. And
and you
they,
don't want to give it.
yeah. And this particular lady, she said, I'd seen you for a few, the workshop series, and then I'm driving down the highway 6 months later, and it's hit me like it's just then that I became conscious,
Yes.
right? So the two by four
Yeah.
on the forehead.
Well, speaking of two by fours, I put this up here just
Oh,
recently, but
yes. Share
this
that.
this is the halo fixation. Talk about a two by four to wake you up. This was so this was the piece of equipment that they put me
This is
in.
so
It's called
scary.
halo fixation.
That's so
Those
scary.
are 4 self-tapping screws right here.
Yeah.
Those are very sharp. They're like needles on the end. And so they wanted to make me unconscious for the surgery, but I was conscious and I knew my neck was broken. And they wanted me unconscious. I said, I'm not going unconscious, guys. Not if my neck's broken, because I don't want to wake up unconscious.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And so they 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 did the operation and drilled 4 self-tapping screws with a local anesthetic in 4 spots on my skull, and they have to go 3 millimeters into the skulls, and they can't break the next layer of bone, because it's bone, space, bone, and you can't go through. So they have to be torqued at exactly the right strength to lock your head in place. And then about a month and a half after they put this on me, I was stretching in bed one morning, stretching, and one of the bolts snapped out of my skull. It broke my skull, and my wife had to rush me to the hospital. And when I was in Ottawa to get it fixed, the doctor was so confident. I said, over in Europe, they had to use these special torque wrenches to put it on, and I was all worried that he wasn't going to like tighten them properly. And the orthopedic guy here, who's one of the top orthopedic guys in the country, says, "See these things right here? These are my torque wrenches."
Oh. So
he had to. Yeah, go ahead.
No, I have a question for you. Okay. And just generally speaking, maybe not necessarily about your own case, but just generally speaking, how do you think or know that an injury, how does that impact a person's self-worth? When somebody's been injured, either mentally, physically, emotionally, how does that impact their self-worth?
Well, I think the slower you go, the worse your self-worth gets. When you're injured and somebody stops your forward motion, and the whole world seems to slow down around you, when that happens to the human brain, we get depressed.
Yeah.
And when the opposite happens, because the opposite happens too, the whole world starts to speed up, and it speeds up beyond your comprehension. That's called mania.
Right.
Both mania and depression are curable.
Right.
Right. But we haven't been looking at it from a neuroscientific side. It's been something the psychiatrists have handled. Yet the spinning and what happens and the spinning out of control, it can be managed in other ways. That's the new Copernicus revolution that he talks about.
That's the good news.
That's the good news. This stuff is curable. Depression is the brain moving slow. Mania is the brain moving fast. I have people in my life right now in my family that are suffering from both. Not both, 2 different people. One mania, another depression. So the mechanisms now, the things that we've been talking about as sort of maybe it works, maybe it doesn't, hocus pocus stuff. Meditation actually works. Meditation is probably the best tool we know of today because it allows you to do what the brain needs to do to get rid of, here it is, Laurie, this fits into your work, duality. We both have the stuff that's happening to us, and then we have a story we tell ourselves about the stuff that's happening to us. And it's the story we tell ourselves that causes us the problem. That's the duality. You've got to get rid of those stories. And what gets rid of those stories is meditation and relaxation. It's very, very simple. Right? And you can do it while you sleep, for crying out loud. Like, if you can't do that, to get on the wagon and then get into the self-worth programs. And when you're at home, read the right stuff, get yourself, educated about how this whole thing works. Because once you figure out how it works, I promise you're going to be excited about it.
Yes, absolutely.
It's so cool.
You know what, Doug? I don't think there's a day that I get up that I'm not excited about my day.
That's awesome. That's
Even
awesome.
even though on the weekend I attended a funeral of a very good friend, his daughter passed away. But that whole experience, because it was all traditionally done, and I met some beautiful people, and I met a new person that's going to be in our playground,
Oh, good.
who's extremely knowledgeable and has her own. She's worked extensively in Nunavut,
Wow. Love it.
and yeah, I think I said it correctly because today she was telling me about professionals who can't even pronounce the name right. But anyway, oh yeah, she said none of it. Some people call it none of it, but it's Nunavut, right?
Yeah.
But
And it means two different things, none of it and Nunavut.
that's
Yeah.
right, exactly. Yes. So I believe that, yeah, it's like a full circle. It's infinite. There's no one way to do things. Do you know there's 250 ways to do dishes, Doug?
Oh, that's
According to the,
hilarious.
yeah, there is 250 ways to do dishes. Well, do you think there might be 250 ways to get well? I would say. Just
There
give me my
is.
options. Give me my options and let me pick and choose. And, you know,
Yeah, and that's the cool thing about what I found with you is when it comes down to it, it's like you provide people with options. You don't say, hey, you got to go do this or you got to go do that or that's something. If you don't do it, you're not going to get better. It's like, here are the options. You pick the piece of fruit you want from the tree.
right.
It's all up to you. And then if you could just guide yourself to reading differently and getting moving, and that's the message right now is
Right.
let's get ourselves moving. And the other thing that causes depression almost every time is thinking about yourself and how you're doing. Okay,
Mhm.
so you can get that out of your life now. You're doing just fine. You woke up this morning. Forget about it, because if you start thinking about yourself and the impact stuff is going to have on you, that will drive you to depression. So if you're depressed and you continue to think about yourself, well, that's a closed loop, right? So don't do
Yeah,
that to yourself. Just don't
yeah,
do it. It's like smacking yourself in the head and saying my head hurts.
right.
I've done
I
a lot of
always say
that.
that, the brain is going to do what you tell it to do. So um, be careful what you're telling it to do.
Yeah, yeah. And that's the thing about getting into a workshop. Like, get this, okay? So for like your prices are ridiculously low, Lori. I always say that you should raise your prices, but there's 10 workshops. They're an hour each. If you can't take 10 hours to figure out the last 40 years of your life, or 30 years or 50 years or whatever it is, then what's your life actually worth? So get into it, get that in your head. 10 hours, 10 1 hour sessions, and then you'll be in a better position to make the next decision. Does that make
Yeah,
sense, Lori?
absolutely.
Okay, because that's what
Yeah.
happened to me. I got close to the edge, and then you walked up behind me and just booted me off the edge there.
I said, you're not done. You have more work. And there's a group of guys that want to hang out with you once a week for an hour, and they're all signed up, and we're going to be starting soon. And
I look
yeah,
forward to that. That's going to be
oh
so
yeah,
much fun.
they're looking forward to you too. It's going to be a fabulous men's group. And I had one of my clients say, "Boy, would I love to be a fly on that wall when you
Oh,
facilitate that group."
well, it can get dealing with guys now. Like I don't hang around with any guys I don't hug.
Exactly.
Like everything's changed. Everything's changed in my life. It's like the more I can hug people, the more energy I get, right? And
Absolutely.
my dad's become a hugger because of it. You know what I
Oh
mean?
yeah.
And it's
Yeah.
like all of a sudden I turn around and he's trying to give me a hug. I'm like, didn't we just hug?
Yeah. Exactly. Exactly.
And people I still go to people's homes. Like I still go to people's homes, and you can just tell there's no hugging going on there.
Exactly.
It's
Exactly.
like,
Do you know
holy
that if
cow.
you're emotionally unstable, which would be a lot of people,
Yeah.
you need 10 hugs a day. If you're stabilized and you're healthy, you still need 4 hugs a day.
And the hugs need a certain duration.
That's right. But any longer than 3 minutes, it's sex.
No.
Okay? And I'm not going to watch that.
In the driveway? Come on.
Yeah, exactly. I tell you, yeah. If it's 3 minutes or more, you got to, cut it off. But yeah, it's and of course COVID did a lot of damage around that because we weren't allowed to touch people and be near people, and you had to have life-size condoms to even say hello. Like really. Yeah.
Well, we'd be amiss today, and I wanted to leave it to the end today, but to just chat a little bit about the Invictus Games, and
Yes. Bring us up to speed.
well, I just everything's moving. TDC has the agreement. The cohorts of veterans are going strong. So what TDC is doing is it's educating veterans, getting them into the programs, getting them versed in media, and then they're going to be ready to go to the Invictus Games and do some of the media work there. So it's a
Awesome.
perfect. I think CBC or no, Bell Media. I think I shouldn't use swear words, but I think Bell Media's got the agreement, and then there'll be a whole bunch of opportunities for these veterans to skyrocket themselves to the top, to be able to pick and choose what they want to do in a new media world, right? I mean, this whole thing about these mergers, people see the high level stuff in the stock market, but the whole media industry is changing, and nobody would know that better than you, Laurie. Like, maybe you could explain to people what's happened,
Well, I think people have become very particular about what they want to allow in to their brain. So with streaming, that has impacted the media industry big time. Like I shared yesterday with my colleague, I said, listen, I can get on, I have my studio 24/7. I can get on the air 24 hours a day, 7 days a week and broadcast. Versus the old days when I was first on the golf show, you had to drive an hour to the studio, go into the studio 3 minutes, then get in your car and drive an hour back home. And I did that for 6 months, all through the summer. And now I actually delivered a workshop from a hotel room sitting on the toilet.
And it looks exactly like it does behind you now.
Ron was in the other room watching a movie, and I had this class to do.
Yeah.
And so actually, it was one of our colleagues, and they said, "Where are you?" And because they could see the shower in the background, and I said, "I'm in a bathroom." So that's how broadcasting has changed. Yeah. And none of us wear anything from the waist down that's attractive. Our pajama pants, or no pants.
Oh yeah. Anything goes. That's so true.
Yeah. And we can be out there in a much bigger way, better way, because, back in the day, that was Chum Radio, which was the biggest national radio station channel or whatever. And I was on the air 10 weeks and I got syndicated to Vancouver. And now I have people in Vancouver calling me in Halifax wanting to be in the workshops, and I had no facilitator out there.
Really?
We didn't have this technology then. You had to do it. We did everything in person.
So,
right?
So yeah. Very interesting. So the learning curve in the technology space is real.
Oh yeah.
It's real. But things are going phenomenal. I mean, 5 shows up and running, working 6 hours a week, on the air at least. And you can get it up and running
in minutes
today. Yeah. I don't know what they're going to do. How are they I just don't see the traditional media, the mainstream media surviving much longer. No. And it seems like most of the big hosts are starting their own broadcast shows or podcasts, correct?
That's right.
Yeah.
Well, it'll be like the video stores, remember we used to go rent movies?
Yeah. Okay.
We don't do that anymore.
Yeah. Yeah, this has been fantastic today, Laurie. Hearing from Dr. Laurie Davis on self-worth is something that you should do in your lifetime if you're listening to this show. Take the short route. I'm always one to take the shortest route possible to get there. If somebody's got a
Right.
better way, so a better mousetrap, like at least take a look at it, right? Open up, take a look at what Dr. Laurie has to say, and we're going to be having some really cool guests on. Thanks for tuning in today. Really appreciate it. And Laurie, good luck up there at the casino. Okay, so don't make any big investments. Okay,
Oh, no,
at the poker
no.
table. Okay.
I'll try not to. I've been a good girl so far, so I think I'm going to be all right. So, bye, everybody. We'll be back tomorrow, Wednesday,
But
well, 9
bye-bye.
a.m.
We'll see you next Tuesday.
Yeah. Bye, Doug.